Sorry, I was interrupted. So like I was saying, this friend of mine, his parents said if it was the Lone Ranger or or Leave It to Beaver, they'd let him watch that. But not the things that were on the TV then in the 90s, 20 years ago, and now it's much worse. I mentioned this in Shul Shabbos, and they said, even if he watches it, that's between him and the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But for a younger man like Ben Shapiro to talk about a show like Game of Thrones, Baruch Hashem, I never saw that show, and I understand it's really inappropriate for Ben Torah to watch. And Baruch Hashem, I never watched it, and now it's over. I'm not saying I never saw anything I shouldn't have seen, but you don't talk about these things. You have to have a little bit of busha. You have to have some shame, even if you do. Like I was saying, I think about the shows we watched in the 90s, and I go back and watch a show like Third Rock from the Sun, and I watched about 5 minutes and was like, I used to watch this? I couldn't believe it. I can't let my kids watch that. Whereas I could let my kids watch a show from the 60s or the 50s. It's not the end of the world for them to watch that. But a show from the 90s, really, they were not appropriate. And the shows now are even worse. I remember listening to the radio, they were talking about Fuller House. And the producer of Fuller House said this is the only unabashedly family-friendly show on TV. So I was like, oh, very good, let's watch it. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, this is not family-friendly, I'm sorry. I told my kids they couldn't watch it. They could watch the old Full House from the 80s and 90s, but not the new one. I didn't think it was appropriate. And even the old one had some things that were questionable. Have to recognize what's what. Certain things are not appropriate for children, not appropriate for adults either. And for a younger man like Ben Shapiro, wears a yarmulke all the time, to give commentary on Game of Thrones, I don't know if it passed so much. All right, people could say me, I wear Strimal Shabbos, it doesn't pass for me to talk about what I talk about, so maybe it's the same thing. But essentially, I think there's a nafkamina between a show like Game of Thrones and the Chvei's, the Dick Van Dyke Show, or F Troop, or something like that, or Get Smart, which still, it's Bittul Torah, and there are issues that are hashkafically problematic, but some of those we can deal with a little bit easier. But I want to mention Misha Rosa, Soita B'Kukulusa, how different the society has become. I remember there was a guest speaker at a shul in Queens, and I was at a friend's house for Shabbos. A shul, a modern Orthodox shul, Eitz Chaim on 73rd Avenue. And I still remember from over 20 years ago the drasha that this guest speaker gave. I don't know if it was exactly connected to this, but I think it's shaykh to this. People might be familiar with Laurel and Hardy. Now, they didn't start as a team. And Oliver Hardy, people know his trademark was he would play with his tie. And that started before he teamed up with Stan Laurel. And when he was in the silent movies, I don't know if it was Max Sennett or Hal Roach. I was once at Hal Roach's grave. He's buried in Elmira, New York, not too far from Mark Twain, the same cemetery as Mark Twain. Hal Roach is buried in Elmira, New York. Hal Roach actually lived to be a Zaken Mufluk, I think over 100 years old. He outlived most of his stars, including all the Little Rascals. Anyway, I don't know if it was Hal Roach or Max Sennett or whoever it was at the time. But you have to understand, film was very expensive. And if the censors wanted to take something out, that was a waste of money. And the producers might say, you ad-lib something, and they have to remove it. The cost will go on you. So Oliver Hardy was playing a sailor swabbing the deck, and he thought it would be funny if he'd blow his nose in his tie. But he realizes that the censors are probably not going to like it. And this was pre-code. And so he just fiddled with his tie, and that's how it became his trademark. We go forward about 20 years. Someone who was famous in the silent movies, his first real talkie, full talking talkie, Charlie Chaplin in 1940 made The Great Dictator. Chaplin writes in his autobiography, this was not in this lecture, but I'm adding this. I remember reading Chaplin's autobiography when I was, this 25 years ago probably, I'm reading this. I still remember this. Chaplin writes that he was frightened. That was already when the Hayes office was open. In the mid-30s, they opened the Hayes office, which would censor the movies. And so he was afraid the Hayes office would eviscerate the movie The Great Dictator. Especially, it was before America got into the war. It was politically not expedient to be criticizing Hitler. Similar to how there was an FBI investigation against Bishop Fulton Sheen because he was criticizing the communists, and it was before America was really fighting against the communists. They were trying to treat Russia as an ally after World War II. And Bishop Sheen would see nothing of it. He knew how evil communism was. Chaplin, on the other hand, was a little bit of a socialist, but he was against the Nazis. And Chaplin, like I said, he was afraid that the Hayes office would pull apart his whole movie. To his surprise, there was only one thing that was removed from the movie, a dirty word. What was the dirty word? It wasn't even a 4-letter word. It was a 5-letter word. Lousy. Lousy. That was considered in 1940 to be a dirty word. They could not have it in a movie. Can you imagine? The previous year, Clark Gable had to pay a big fine for using the word damn in the movie Gone with the Wind. I never saw that. I never saw Casablanca either, but I've seen The Great Dictator. I've seen most of Chaplin's movies, not all of them, but a lot of them. I never saw The Countess from Hong Kong. But I think I've seen all his other features and a lot of his shorts. Anyway, let's fast forward another decade, the 50s. And this I remember they did mention in this lecture, in this drasha, Lucille Ball was not allowed to use the word pregnant in a TV show. And another decade later, I Dream of Jeannie. I met Barbara Eden once, a very nice lady. She should be well. Barbara Eden was not allowed to show her navel. And we won't mention what they show in a show like Game of Thrones that I've heard. Baruch Hashem, I never saw. And I'm not saying I'm a big tzaddik, but I don't have HBO. I'm not going to spend extra money on HBO. And that's really it. I did watch some of the HBO shows that I probably shouldn't have watched. A few episodes, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Shows that, I'm not going to mention. Anyway, one comedy show with a lot of Jewish themes. From the same people who made Seinfeld, you know what I mean. So anyway, but like I said, we see the outside world is getting so much worse. Mishara is a site of a kukalusa, Yazer is Hatzmei B'niyayim. The one who sees the Sota, there's a red hawk there, in her state of embarrassment with the ordeal of the bitter waters. You'll remove yourself from wine and take the Nazarite vow. Go above and beyond. There's nothing in the Torah that says you can't watch television. But maybe Yazer es Hatzmei B'niyayim. I remember Rabbi Victor Miller, he said, just to be a Yid today, Ader l'Chayid, Asher B'Shabbos, you're already like a Nazir. Because you're separated from society. Like last week I went to this training, and I'm sitting with all Galachim, and I can sit with them and have a certain level of fellowship with them. But there's another level of fellowship I can't have with them. I can't sit and eat with them. They had a barbecue. I couldn't go and have a barbecue with them, and I didn't want to. There is a professional relationship which is appropriate, and then there is a certain level of fellowship that you can have, particularly with pious Gentiles, religious people who seeking out morality and ethics and spirituality is very good. You can have a certain level of fellowship with them, but it cannot be total. There's still a level of separation that we have, that we're like Nazirim, that we can't sit and drink wine with them. We can't even really sit and drink beer with them. We're separate from them. We can sit and drink wine and beer with our own, but not with them. And it's not an insult. It's just recognition of that there's a certain amount of difference that we have. And that's chus. Right after the Nazir, you have Birkas Kohanim, that we should be blessed with peace and protection. And then from there, we have the Chanukah Mizbeach. I want to talk a little bit about the Chanukah Mizbeach. The Chanukah Mizbeach, we know all the Nesiim brought the same korban, and each Shevet, each tribe had a prince that brought the sacrifice, the dedication of the tabernacle. Now, there are different ways to count the 12 tribes. You could have the Levites are included, and then Joseph is only one tribe, or the Levites are excluded, as it is with the apportionment of the land, and then Joseph is two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. And that's how it is with the 12 princes offering their sacrifices. The Levites were not included. Talmud says, in Medrash, that Aaron was the high priest, would be considered the prince, the leader of the Levites, and he had Chalishas Hadas. He was excluded. He felt left out, and God's answer to him was that they brought the sacrifices that one time, but yours will be forever. And what was that? The menorah. And the question is, the menorah, once the temple was destroyed, there's no more menorah. So what do you mean it's forever? So the simple answer is, of course, well, you have Hanukkah. the thing was in the time of the temple, the menorah was lit every day. And we only have the Hanukkah menorah 8 days in the year. The answer I give is like this. According to the Riyah Kodesh, according to the Rizal, before we recite the Pesukei Zimra, there are 2 psalms that we should recite. The Ashkenazim accepted the one, Psalm 30, Mizmashir Chanukah Sapais LaDavid, the psalm, the song for the dedication of the temple by David, mentions Hanukkah. It's a psalm that's related to Hanukkah. And then the other one is Psalm 67, which is the Sephardim and the Hasidim say, and especially in the Sephardic Sidurim, you're going to see Psalm 67 and some of the Hasidic Sidurim. Psalm 67 is the source of menorah. It's the shape of the menorah. The title is the lights of the menorah, and then each of the branches, there's 8 verses. So one is the title, and then there's 7 verses, and their length makes the perfect shape of the menorah because it starts off with a short verse, the next one's longer, the next one's longer, the middle one's the longest. Those 7 when you exclude the title, and then again it gets shorter and shorter, just like long, middle, short, and then long, then short, middle, long. So it makes the shape of a menorah. And the Mekubalim say that when you recite this, it's as if you're fulfilling the mitzvah of the menorah. And that's the message that we have. That the menorah, the light of Hanukkah, which is the light in the darkness, in the winter, just before we lose everything, when we don't have prophecy, with that light of the menorah, the light of Hanukkah, that goes with us all year long. And that schus, we'll have all of those things that we're looking forward to, and that restoration as well.
Avami.
Thank you for listening. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you later.